Sir, should I stop? Why? There's a woman in the rain. Keep driving. Sir, she's not begging. Stop the car.
Seoul never sleeps. Even at 2 in the morning, the city breathes. Neon signs bleed color into wet pavement. Delivery bikes cut through traffic. Convenience stores glow like lighthouses for the lonely. And in all of that noise, all of that movement, all of that relentless energy, nobody notices the young woman sitting under the awning of a closed pharmacy on Mapo Street. Nobody ever notices Imani. She has learned to become invisible. It is not a skill she was taught. It is something life pressed into her, slowly, quietly, the way rain eventually shapes stone. She sits with her knees pulled close, her jacket soaked through, a small cardboard mat beneath her that does almost nothing against the cold concrete. Her dark brown skin carries the kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. Her eyes, warm and deep, watch the street with the patience of someone who stopped expecting anything good to walk toward her a long time ago. She is 28 years old. She should be somewhere else. She knows this. But knowing something and being able to change it are two very different things. Her father, Kwame Mensah, had come to Seoul from Ghana with nothing but determination and a gift for fabric. He built a small textile import business over 20 years. It was not enormous, but it was honest, and it was his, and it gave Imani a childhood that was warm even when money was tight. Her mother, Abena, died when Imani was 14, a quiet illness that took her before anyone fully understood how serious it was. After that, her father remarried. Mrs. Yoon Chaewon, a Korean woman with beautiful manners in public and cold calculations in private. Imani never trusted her, but she stayed respectful, because her father loved this woman, and Imani loved her father more than she loved being right. When Kwame died 2 years ago, Mrs. Yoon moved so fast it felt rehearsed. Legal documents appeared, property transfers were filed. A lawyer Imani had never seen before handled everything with practiced efficiency. By the time Imani understood what was happening, the house was already gone from her name. Her father's savings redirected, his business transferred to accounts she had no access to. And then one evening, Mrs. Yoon placed a single suitcase at the front door. "This arrangement no longer works," she said, without looking at Imani directly. "You are not my blood. You never were." She closed the gate. Imani stood on the street outside her childhood home with one suitcase and the particular silence that comes after something breaks so completely that there is no sound left for it. She tried. Let nobody say she did not try. She applied for jobs, carrying her qualifications and her fluent Korean and her father's quiet dignity in how she presented herself. Some interviews went well until they saw her face and found reasons to call someone else. Others were honest rejections. Few led to short contracts that ended without explanation. She rented a small room until the money ran out, and then she had nothing. No family, no safety net, no one in Seoul willing to carry her even temporarily. And so, Mapo Street, rainy Tuesday, 2 in the morning. She is not dramatic about it. She simply exists inside it, the way she has existed inside every hard thing life gave her, by staying quiet and enduring. What nobody on Mapo Street knows, what nobody anywhere knows, is what lives inside Imani's hands. She discovered it when she was 9 years old. A neighborhood boy had fallen and broken his wrist, crying in a way that made everyone around him panic. Imani knelt beside him and took his hand without thinking, the way children do instinctively. Within minutes, the boy stopped crying. He said the pain was gone. His wrist, which had been swelling visibly, settled. A doctor confirmed later that the fracture had somehow already begun healing in a way that made no medical sense. Imani's hand had ached for 3 days afterward. She learned over years of quiet and painful experimentation what her gift was and what it cost. She could pull sickness and pain out of another person's body through physical contact. Not completely, not always instantly, but genuinely and powerfully. And every time she did, whatever she pulled out of them moved into her. She absorbed it. She carried it. Some of it passed through her over time. Some of it layered and settled and stayed. She stopped using it freely by the time she was 16. She was careful about who she touched and when. It was not something she could explain to anyone without being called unstable. It was not something she could advertise. It was simply a quiet, expensive truth she lived with alone. The rain gets heavier. She pulls her jacket tighter and watches a taxi splash through a puddle across the street. That is when she hears it. A long black car moving too slowly for normal traffic, gliding along the curb like it is reading the street rather than simply passing through it. It stops directly in front of her. The window rolls down. Imani does not move. The man inside the car looks at her for a moment without speaking. He is Korean, sharp-featured, somewhere in his mid-30s. His eyes are dark and completely unreadable. He is not looking at her the way men sometimes look at women, alone at night on empty streets, and she feels the difference immediately. He is looking at her the way someone looks at something that confused them, something they were not expecting to feel affected by. He opens the door and steps out into the rain without an umbrella, without hesitation. He is lean, and the way he carries himself says very clearly that he is a man accustomed to rooms going quiet when he enters them. He crouches slightly so he is closer to her level. From his inside jacket pocket, he removes a slim black card and holds it toward her. "Leave this place," he says quietly in Korean. His voice is low, even, with no performance in it. "You should not be begging in the rain." Imani looks at the card, then at his face. She has been offered pity before. She knows what pity looks like. This is not exactly that. She cannot name what it is, which unsettles her slightly. She reaches for the card. Their fingers touch. Jang Hyun-woo goes completely still. Not the stillness of a man being polite. The stillness of a man whose body has just done something without his permission. His eyes shift, just slightly, just enough for someone paying close attention to notice. The tightness that has lived behind his eyes for 3 years, the constant, grinding presence of pain that his doctors have been unable to fully suppress, lifts, not reduces, lifts, entirely. He stands slowly. He looks at his own hand. Imani pulls the card back toward herself, watching him with careful eyes. He says nothing else. He gets back into the car. The window rolls up. The car moves. She stares at the card in her hand. $1 million in accessible funds. The name on the card is not printed. There is only a private contact number. She sits with it in the rain for a long time. Inside the car, Hyun-woo presses 2 fingers to his own wrist and breathes. The pain is gone. After 1,094 consecutive days of it, it is simply gone. He is not a man who panics easily. He is not a man who believes in things he cannot verify. But he also is not a man who ignores what his own body is telling him. "Take me home," he says to his driver. By 7 the next morning, Dr. Kwon Tae-shin is standing in Hyun-woo's private medical suite with scan results in his hands and an expression on his face that he has never worn in 20 years of practicing medicine. The inflammation markers are down by 63%, Dr. Kwon says carefully. "The nerve degradation that we tracked last week has partially reversed. I don't have a clinical explanation for this." Hyun-woo sits on the edge of the examination bed, watching his doctor with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Find her," he says. His men locate Imani within 48 hours. She has not used the card yet. She is still in the Mapo district, sheltering differently, moving between spots, the card tucked carefully inside the lining of her jacket, like something she has not yet decided what to do with. When 2 men in dark clothing approach her on a Wednesday afternoon and tell her that Director Jang would like to speak with her, she does not run. She looks at them both carefully, measures the situation with the quiet instincts she has sharpened over 2 years of surviving on the street, and then asks one question. "Am I in danger?" The taller one hesitates. "Not from us." It is not a perfect answer, but it is an honest one. She can tell the difference. She goes with them. The estate is in the elevated northern district of Seoul. From the road, it looks like architecture. From the gate, it looks like a decision. Armed security at every checkpoint. Cameras positioned with professional precision. The kind of place where the walls themselves feel like they are paying attention. Imani is brought into a private library on the 2nd floor. It is floor-to-ceiling books and low lighting, and the kind of quiet that is intentional rather than accidental. Hyun-woo is already there, standing near the window, his back to her when she enters. He turns. In the light, he looks different from the man in the rain. Sharper, more contained. But his eyes carry something when they land on her that he does not entirely manage to keep out of them. "Sit," he says. "I'll stand," she replies, in Korean so clean and natural that he blinks slightly. A beat of silence. "You grew up here," he says. "It is not a question." "Born and raised in Seoul," she says. "My parents were Ghanaian, but this city is the only home I have ever known." He studies her face for a moment. "What you did in the rain, when you touched my hand." "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Another silence. This one has weight in it. Imani looks at the man in front of her and makes a calculation. He is clearly dangerous. The estate around her has already told her that much. But she is also a woman who has been sleeping on the street, and the thing she has spent her whole life hiding has apparently already revealed itself, whether she intended it to or not. "I can sometimes ease pain," she says carefully, "through contact. I don't fully understand it myself." "My doctors have treated me for 3 years," he says. "Last night was the first night I slept without pain medication." She says nothing. "I'm not asking you to explain it medically," he continues. "I'm asking you to stay. You'll have a room, security, and anything you need. You are not a prisoner, but I need you here." Imani looks around the library slowly, then back at him. "You're dying," she says quietly. Something moves across his face, fast, gone just as quickly. "Not anymore," he says. "I hope." She stays. Her room is on the 3rd floor, larger than any space she has lived in since Mrs. Yoon took everything. Clean, warm, with a window that looks over a garden that is carefully maintained even in the grey autumn. She sits on the edge of the bed that first night and holds her own hands in her lap and asks herself if she has made a mistake. She does not sleep much, but she is warm, and for the first time in a long time, she feels physically safe, which is its own complicated thing when safety comes from the most feared man in Seoul. The first healing session happens 3 days later. Dr. Kwon is present, monitoring Hyunwoo's vitals in real time. Imani sits across from Hyunwoo at a low table, and she places both her hands over his. She does not close her eyes dramatically. She simply breathes and allows what happens to happen. It takes 7 minutes. Hyunwoo's readings improve measurably. His inflammation markers drop. The tension in his jaw that Dr. Kwon has never seen him without eases. He exhales slowly, like a man setting down something incredibly heavy. And Imani, 2 hours later, is alone in her room, curled on her side, absorbing the pain that moved from him into her. She does not cry. She presses her forehead to her knees and breathes through it, the way she always has. She does not tell him. She is not ready to explain that part yet. But Hyunwoo is already watching her more closely than she realizes. He notices things. It is one of the skills that made him dangerous and kept him alive. He notices how she holds her hands slightly away from her body after their sessions. How she declines dinner on those evenings without explanation. How she sometimes presses her palm flat against the wall in the corridor, as if steadying herself when she thinks no one is looking. He says nothing yet, but he files every detail. His mother arrives on a Friday. Madame Jang Myung-hee enters the estate the way she always does, like an inspection. She is elegant and precise, her silver hair perfectly set, her Korean traditional aesthetic deliberate and immaculate. She finds Imani in the garden, sitting on a stone bench, her face turned up toward a rare patch of morning sun. Madame Jang stops several feet away and looks at her the way someone looks at something that does not belong in the frame of a painting they have always arranged themselves. "You are the one my son brought from the street," she says, not a question, a categorization. Imani meets her eyes calmly. "I am Imani Mensah. Good morning." Madame Jang's expression does not change. "I want you to understand something clearly. My son has been targeted by people who want to destroy this family. Anyone near him becomes a target. Anyone he shows interest in becomes a weapon in the wrong hands." She pauses. I am telling you this not as a kindness. I am telling you this so that you make the intelligent choice and leave before it becomes necessary for someone to encourage you to do so. Imani looks at the older woman for a long, quiet moment. Thank you for the warning, she says simply. Madame Jiang waits for more. There is no more. She leaves. Can you imagine sitting in that garden and feeling the weight of that woman's hostility and still not moving? Comment below if you think Imani is brave or simply has nothing left to lose. Hyunwoo hears about the encounter from Chief Oh Dae-jung within the hour. His expression does not visibly change, but he finds his mother before lunch. You spoke to her, he says. I did what was necessary, Madame Jiang replies. What is necessary, he says quietly, is that no one in this estate makes her feel unwelcome. Am I understood? His mother looks at her son, this man she raised, this man who has controlled Seoul's underground since he was 26 years old, and she sees something in his face she has not seen before. Not since he was a small boy who used to bring home injured birds and refused to leave them outside. She does not argue, but her eyes say that she is not finished with this conversation. Hyunwoo's brother Sung-jae arrives that same weekend. He is older by 4 years, broader, with a politician's smile and an accountant's eyes. He has spent years building his own network carefully and quietly, always in the shadow of his more powerful younger brother, always aware that the empire would eventually have to go somewhere. He is charming to Imani at dinner. Perhaps too charming. He asks questions with easy warmth, the kind of warmth that is practiced rather than felt. Imani answers politely and watches him the way she watches everything now, with the eyes of someone who has learned that the surface of things and the truth of things are rarely the same. Under the table, Hyunwoo's hand rests near his glass and does not move, but his eyes track every word his brother says. After dinner, alone in the corridor, Sung-jae stops beside Imani. He's possessive, he says quietly, still smiling. You should know that about him before it's too late to matter. Imani turns to look at him. Too late for what? Sung-jae holds her gaze for a moment, then moves on. She stands in the corridor for a moment after he leaves and wonders what, exactly, she has walked into the middle of. The weeks pass, the healing sessions continue. Hyunwoo's health improves in ways that make Dr. Kwon use the word remarkable in his private notes and then immediately question his own scientific neutrality. The episodes of paralysis stop. The pain, which had been his constant companion for 3 years, becomes something that visits occasionally rather than something that never leaves. And something else is happening too, something neither of them planned. Hyunwoo starts walking with her in the compound garden in the early mornings. It begins as security logistics, he tells himself. She should not be alone outside, but it becomes something else entirely, and he knows it, and he walks with her anyway. She talks during these walks, slowly at first, testing each word before she releases it. She tells him about her father's fabric shop, how it smelled of dye and wood, and her father's particular cologne. She tells him that her mother used to sing Ghanaian folk songs while cooking Korean food and call it fusion long before anyone used that word seriously. She tells him about being the only black girl in her primary school class and learning to move through discomfort the way you learn to swim, by accepting that the water will not warm to your preference. He listens to all of it without interrupting, without offering solutions or commentary. Simply listening. It undoes her slightly. She is not accustomed to being listened to. She asks him questions too, carefully chosen ones. He answers some and deflects others, but the ones he answers are honest in a way that surprises her. He tells her that he has not slept well in 4 years before she arrived, that the loneliness of his position is something he has never said out loud to another person before this moment. Why are you telling me? She asks. He is quiet for several seconds. Because you already know what it is to be completely alone, he says, and you're still standing. I find you unexpectedly difficult to be dishonest around. She looks at the garden path and says nothing. But something shifts inside her chest that she files carefully away and refuses to examine too directly. Then one morning, everything changes. Imani is in the kitchen, which she has taken to using early, before the household staff arrives, because she finds cooking grounding. She's making contomare stew with Korean anchovy broth, her own private cultural fusion, when one of the junior staff members walks in, sees her, and says something under her breath in Korean that is clearly not meant to be kind. She pretends not to hear. She is practiced at that too, but Hyunwoo is at the kitchen doorway behind the staff member, and he hears it perfectly clearly. The staff member's employment ends before lunch. No confrontation, no scene. She simply does not return after her midday break. And Imani finds a handwritten note on the kitchen counter by evening in Hyunwoo's precise handwriting. It says only, "This kitchen is yours whenever you want it." She holds the note for a long time. Is this man falling for her, or is he simply protecting an asset? Comment what you think is really happening inside Jang Hyunwoo right now. The answer becomes clearer on the night Imani nearly collapses. It is after their 4th healing session, the longest one yet. Dr. Kwon has left. Hyunwoo is in his study reviewing documents. Imani makes it to the 3rd floor corridor before her legs stop cooperating. She catches the wall with both hands, pressing her forehead against the cool surface, breathing in short, careful pulls. The pain she absorbed is sitting in her chest like a stone. She does not make a sound. But Hyunwoo is at the end of that corridor. He crosses the distance in seconds, and his hands are on her shoulders before she can straighten. "What is happening?" he says, and his voice has lost every layer of control. "I'm fine," she manages. Imani, just her name, but the way he says it makes pretending impossible. She looks at him, he looks at her, and she tells him all of it. The gift, the cost, what happens to her body every time she heals someone, how it has been accumulating, how she hides it, how she has always hidden it. He listens without moving. When she finishes, the silence is so complete that she can hear the garden through the closed window. "You've been hurting yourself to heal me," he says. "That is how it works," she says quietly. "Then we stop," he says immediately. "If we stop, your disease comes back. Then it comes back." She stares at him. "You would rather die than let me carry some pain." "I would rather die," he says, with complete steadiness, "than be the reason you suffer." Imani does not have words for a moment. Nobody in her life, not her father's business partners, not her schoolmates, not a single person after her father died, has ever said anything to her with that kind of uncalculated sincerity. She looks away before he can see what it does to her face. "Let Dr. Kwon monitor me," she says finally. "He can set limits. We do this carefully." Hyunwoo studies her for a long moment. "Carefully," he repeats, like he is making a commitment out of the word. He does not let go of her shoulders immediately, and she does not step back. Dr. Kwon is briefed the next morning. He sets strict session limits, monitoring Imani's vitals as closely as Hyunwoo's now. He is a scientist who has just had his understanding of medicine quietly restructured, and he handles it with the grace of a man who respects what he cannot yet explain. But the bigger disruption comes from outside the estate walls. Mrs. Yoon Chae-won has been living comfortably for 2 years on everything she took from the Mensah family. She hears about Imani through Seoul's social undercurrents, the way whispers travel in a city that is always listening. A young black African woman living inside Jang Hyunwoo's estate, apparently connected to his mysteriously improving health. Mrs. Yoon is not a woman who misses an opportunity. She arrives at the estate gates on a grey Thursday with a lawyer and requests a meeting. Hyunwoo allows it. He wants to see her face. The meeting happens in a formal sitting room. Imani is present. Mrs. Yoon sits across from them both, composed and deliberate, her eyes moving to Imani with the particular discomfort of someone facing a consequence they did not fully plan for. "I have information," Mrs. Yoon begins, "about Kwame Mensah's death." Imani's hands still in her lap. "His death was not entirely natural," Mrs. Yoon says, watching Imani's face carefully. "There were people involved, a business dispute that escalated. Documents were signed under conditions that were not entirely voluntary." She pauses. I have kept these documents as a private matter, but given the current circumstances, I feel it is only right that Imani knows the truth of what happened to her father. The room is very quiet. Imani's voice when she speaks is completely even. What kind of documents? Mrs. Yoon places a sealed folder on the table. The documents inside are layered and complex. Legal papers, correspondence, financial transfers, a medical report with annotations that were never meant to be seen. As Imani reads, her face does not break, but her hands, which have always carried the truth of what she feels before her face does, press flat and white-knuckled against the table. Her father's death was connected to a business deal gone catastrophically wrong. Pressure had been applied. His health had been deliberately compromised through access to his medications, which had been quietly altered by someone paid to do it. The trail in the documents leads to a rival faction, a name that makes Hyunwoo, sitting silently beside Imani, go completely and dangerously still. The Kim faction, his longest and most actively hostile enemy network, which means the people responsible for Kwame Mensah's death have been operating directly against Hyunwoo's interests for years, without either of them knowing their stories were already connected. Mrs. Yoon watches both their faces and understands that she has just placed herself between two very large forces. Her composure slips slightly. I want immunity, she says, from whatever happens next. I kept the documents. I preserved the evidence. That should count for something. Hyunwoo looks at her for a long time. Leave, he says quietly. We had a deal. The documents and then. Leave, he repeats. Same tone. But this time, Mrs. Yoon does not argue. When she's gone, Imani sits with the folder in her hands and does not speak for a very long time. Hyunwoo does not fill the silence. He simply stays present beside her, which is exactly what she needs without knowing how to ask for it. She kept the evidence, Imani says finally. For 2 years, she kept it and said nothing. Because she needed it to be useful to her, Hyunwoo says. Today it finally was. Imani closes the folder. When she looks at him, there is grief in her face, and beneath the grief something harder and fiercer. The people who did this, she says, are they still out there? Yes, he says, no softening, no redirection. Are they the same people who want to destroy you? Yes. She nods slowly, as if this information is settling into a place inside her that was already prepared for it. What nobody outside that room knows yet is that the Kim faction has already become aware that Imani is inside Jang Hyunwoo's estate. And they're not planning to wait and see what that means. 3 days later, during a routine security rotation change at 6 in the morning, a window of 4 minutes opens in the estate's surveillance coverage. It is the kind of window that does not happen by accident. Imani is taken from the garden. Not loudly, not violently, a tranquilizer delivered so efficiently that she is unconscious before she can make a sound. The gap in coverage closes. The garden looks exactly as it always does. It takes 11 minutes for anyone to notice she is not where she should be. 11 minutes is a long time when someone is already gone. Hyunwoo is in his study when Chief Oh appears at the doorway. Oh Daejong has been at Hyunwoo's side for 10 years. He has delivered bad news before, but the way he stands in the doorway now, straight-backed and carefully neutral in his expression, tells Hyunwoo everything before a single word is spoken. Imani, Hyunwoo says. She's gone, Oh says. 20 minutes ago, the Kim faction. The silence in the study lasts exactly 4 seconds. Then Jang Hyunwoo stands up from his desk, and the version of him that the city has spent years fearing walks into the room fully and without compromise. Close everything, he says. His voice is low and absolutely level. Every account, every operation, every cooperative agreement we have with anyone, even loosely connected to the Kim network, I want their allies feeling the pressure within the hour. He moves toward the door, and find me their location. All follows without a word, because this is not strategy. This is not business. Everyone in that estate knows what this is. This is the most feared man in Seoul, going to war for one person. Sung Jae appears in the corridor as Hyunwoo moves through the estate, issuing directives in clipped, precise bursts to people who are already moving. Sungjae watches his younger brother with something that shifts in his expression, something that strips away the practiced politician's calm he usually carries. Hyun-woo, he says. Hyun-woo passes him without slowing. I have a contact, Sungjae says, louder. Inside the Kim network, someone I've maintained for 3 years privately. I never needed to use it before. Hyun-woo stops. He turns and looks at his older brother, the man he has competed with and been wary of and occasionally outmaneuvered for most of his adult life. They look at each other across the corridor in a moment that is longer than it appears. Give me the contact, Hyun-woo says. Sungjae provides the information. It is specific, current, and real. It leads Hyun-woo's team directly to a warehouse in Yeongdongpo district, 2 hours after Imani was taken. Inside the warehouse, Imani is conscious. They did not hurt her beyond the abduction itself. She's a tool to them, a piece of leverage, not a casualty. She is seated with her hands zip-tied in front of her, in a cold concrete room with a single light. There is a guard in the room with a chronic knee injury. He keeps shifting his weight away from his left leg. She notices this the way she always notices these things, instinctively, the way other people notice weather. She does not offer to help him. She watches him carefully instead, cataloguing the room, the sounds beyond the door, the distance between herself and the exit. But then the guard winces sharply and catches the wall, going down on one knee with a sharp intake of breath. Imani is on her feet before she has consciously decided to move. Her zip-tied hands reach toward him awkwardly. Let me, she says, in Korean. He looks at her, suspicious, confused. Your knee, she says. Let me help. He doesn't stop her. Maybe because the pain is overwhelming enough that strange offers become reasonable. Maybe because there is something in her face that is simply trustworthy. Her hands find his knee. 2 minutes later, the guard is staring at his own leg in disbelief. How? He starts. When they come for me, she says quietly. Don't be between me and the door. He stares at her. Then he steps aside. The doors come down 20 minutes later. Hyun-woo's team moves through the warehouse with the efficiency of people who have done this before and the urgency of people with something irreplaceable on the line. The Kim faction's guards make the tactical decision not to engage at full force when they understand exactly how many armed people are surrounding the building. Hyun-woo comes through the door of her room personally. He sees her standing, not sitting, not cowering. Standing, with her zip-tied hands in front of her and her chin level. He crosses the room and cuts the tie with a knife from his jacket. His hands check her wrists, her face, her shoulders, moving quickly and precisely in a way that has nothing of the boardroom in it. I'm not hurt, she says. He looks at her face for a long moment. Everything he does not say out loud lives in that look. I know, he says. She sees his hands, steady as always on the surface, but she has learned to read the things he keeps below the surface now. His jaw is tight in a way that speaks of hours of held-back terror. Without planning to, she reaches forward and places her hand against his jaw, the way she has never initiated contact before, not for healing, simply to say, I see you, I am here. He closes his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then his hand comes up to cover hers, and they stand in the middle of a warehouse in Yeongdongpo district while his team secures the perimeter, and neither of them needs to say anything that matters out loud, because it is all already said. The drive back to the estate is quiet. Imani sits beside him in the back of the car. Their arms are not touching, but the space between them has changed into something that is its own kind of contact. Your brother helped, she says. Hyun-woo is quiet for a moment. He did. He loves you, she says. He just doesn't know how to show it without it costing him something. Hyun-woo turns to look at her profile in the passing city light. When did you become qualified to read people? When I had no one left and had to decide very quickly who was safe and who wasn't, she says simply. He looks at her for a long moment. I'm sorry, he says. She turns to look at him. For what? That the world made you learn that at such a cost. She holds his gaze. It is one of those moments where something either breaks open or it doesn't. And this one does. Quietly, without dramatics. Hi Hyun-woo, she says. I know, he says again, but this time it means something different. It means, I feel it too. I am just as undone by it as you are, and I have never been undone by anything in my life. Back at the estate, Dr. Kwon examines Imani thoroughly. She is physically unharmed. He fusses over her in his precise medical way, and she lets him because she understands it is how he processes concern. Hyunwoo stands near the doorway of the medical suite and watches until Dr. Kwon gives him a look that says, "She is fine, director." He leaves only when he is sure. The Kim faction's operations are dismantled over the following 2 weeks. It is not loud, it is not public, it is the kind of systematic pressure that Hyunwoo applies with the patience and thoroughness of a man who has never needed to rush when the outcome is already decided. Financial networks are disrupted, alliances are severed. The people directly responsible for both Kwame Mensah's death and Imani's abduction face consequences that arrive quietly and without announcement. Mrs. Yoon receives a separate visit from Chief O. She is not harmed. But she is informed, clearly and without room for misinterpretation, that the documents she held onto for 2 years have been submitted to the appropriate legal authorities, along with a full account of the inheritance fraud she committed against Imani. Her lawyer, it turns out, is no longer available to represent her. Imani does not ask for details about any of this. She knows enough. What she focuses on instead is the healing, not of Hyunwoo's body, though that continues steadily. Something else. The healing of the version of herself that Mrs. Yoon's cruelty and the street and the grief all combine to hollow out. She starts cooking again properly, filling the kitchen with the smell of Ghanaian pepper soup and Korean doenjang jjigae at the same time. She starts reading again, walking through Hyunwoo's library with the systematic pleasure of someone rediscovering a part of themselves they had forgotten. Hyunwoo watches her come back to herself and does not interfere. He simply makes space for it, which is, she realizes, its own kind of love. He finds her in the library one evening. She is cross-legged on the floor with 3 books open around her and a cup of tea going cold beside her knee. He sits across from her without asking, with his back against the bookshelf, and opens his own work. They stay like that for 2 hours without speaking. It is the most at peace either of them has felt in longer than they can accurately measure. Imani, he says, when she finally closes the book in her hands. She looks up. I need to tell you something, and I need you to understand that I am not someone who says things I don't mean. She waits. I didn't bring you here because of what you can do, he says. That was how it started. That is not what it is now. He holds her gaze with the particular steadiness of a man who has decided that this is the one place he will not be calculating. What it is now, I don't think I need to explain to you, but I want to say it plainly, because you deserve things said plainly. She is very still. You are the first person I have trusted completely, he says, since I was young enough that trust was still easy. I don't know how to do this, whatever this is, properly, but I know that I want to. Imani looks at this man, Seoul's most feared man, sitting on the floor of his own library, with his guard entirely down, asking her in the most honest way he knows how, for something he has never asked anyone for. She thinks about her father, who used to say that the bravest thing a person can do is open their hands when they have been burned for holding on. She reaches across the space between them and takes his hand, not for healing, just for him. His fingers close around hers and he exhales slowly, and in that quiet library in the northern hills of Seoul, something that was broken in both of them begins, very carefully, very honestly, to knit itself back together. It does not fix everything. His world is still dangerous. Her gift still costs her. His family is still complicated, and his enemies, though diminished, are not entirely gone. These are not problems that love dissolves overnight. But Imani Adaize Mensah, who sat in the rain on Mapo Street with nothing and no one, who carried a gift that cost her more than anyone knew, who lost her parents and her home and her place in the world and kept walking anyway, has found something she stopped believing existed. Not rescue, not charity. A person who sees her completely and chooses her anyway, and Jang Hyun-woo, the most feared man in Seoul, who controlled half the city's underground and slept alone behind armed gates and told himself for years that power was enough, has found the only thing that ever truly frightened him. Not his enemies, not his disease, the possibility of losing her. He had given a stranger $1 million in the rain on a Tuesday night, thinking he was doing her a kindness. He had no idea she was about to save his life in every way that actually counted.